Grant, how are we doing, brother?
Good. How you doing today?
Good, good. We get everyone coming in here. Just give it a minute. If you hear us, welcome, welcome, welcome. Grant,
Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
the hair is looking fantastic.
Always got to work hard at it, right, Brett?
When you wake up in the morning, it sometimes it just feels really good, huh?
Exactly, exactly. It's gonna be a good day.
Oh, it's fantastic. It's fantastic. So cool. Yeah, just getting everything organized here.
Certainly.
Yep, yep, yep. And yeah. How's the week been so far?
It is going well. Just staying busy. How about yours?
All the above.
Yeah. How are things in Florida?
Course, great. Yeah, it's been really good. It's been definitely a great move for us. So
Yeah, that's a good place.
grateful to be here. Yeah, it's really good. Cool. I'm just finalizing the presentation here, and then let's give people a few minutes where they're coming in, and if people
Yeah,
could put in the chat where they're from, Grant, encourage them to do that. That'll be
that'd be great.
helpful. Um, and to see where everyone's at, and then also maybe if the one big thing they're hoping to to um to learn today, if there's anything, and if it's nothing in particular, just being here, that's great. But if there's something we can cover while we're here, that would be awesome too. Um, and then we'll get started here in just a few minutes. Let people kind of trickle in here. So A, where you from?
Sounds
Put it
good.
in the chat, and B, maybe one thing you're hoping to get out of today's our time together. And it'd be good too for why we get started, Grant, and I don't know how he'll know about Stoic funds, but it's good for you to kind of tee that up. And
Yeah, yeah. Once we want to get started here, we'll give. What do you think? Give everyone about another minute or two, and then we can kind of launch into that. That work for you?
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And then if you're, let's see here, if you're not, for some reason, our setup here is not webinar style. So Mark, if you could hide your video, that way it would hide it. If that makes sense. For some reason, it's not on the webinar. It's on a meeting, which is means the video is showing up there. So if you could hide that, because Grant and I'll be writing this. So sorry about that, Mark. If that makes sense, if
Yeah.
you just click on hide video. Um, cool. All right. I think we're ready to get going
Perfect.
here.
Yeah, let's go. So, thank you everyone for joining. My name is Grant Reeves. I am the managing director of Stoic Equity Partners. We are a commercial real estate investment firm based in Daphne, Alabama. We specialize in multi-tenant flex industrial in the Southeast. We run some syndications as well as investment funds. We currently have a closed-ended fund that we are raising called SCP Industrial Holdings One. It is currently has about 500,000 square feet of flex industrial under contract that we're closing in the next few weeks. And yeah, so thank you everyone for being here. Excited to have my good friend Brett here. This is going to tell us about DSTs and how you can exit certain assets to be able to change them into longer assets, whether that's Stoics funds or into other real estate or other asset classes. So thank you everyone for being here. Excited to get started.
Absolutely. Thanks, Grant. And thanks everyone for being here. We're gonna have a kind of a deep dive and we're gonna record this. And so Grant will have the recording after this as well. So definitely take some notes, but write some questions down. If you have questions along the way, you can put them into the chat. But for those who are just get to know me for the first time, my name is Brett Swartz, founder of Capital Gains Tax Solutions. And we exist with our company to unlock capital gains to unleash freedom and flexibility and impact for our clients. We believe that now more than ever, it's important to have not only a cash flow strategy, but also a tax flow strategy. Okay. We're also going to couple that with a debt flow strategy. Most of us, I think, are taught or trained or built, or we generally are pretty focused on just the cash flow. We got that pretty figured out, but it's that tax flow, the before and after of the exits, and then the debt flow and connecting all three. And how do you do that? Well, we're going to present the deferred sales trust strategy as a way to do that. And it's a little, we like to call it the least or the most vetted tax strategy your client or your CPA has never heard of. Okay, we're gonna start with this little video here, just as a little intro and get the energy going as well. So check this video out.
Are you telling me that you have a way to defer the tax situation there? Is that what you're telling me?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. And so the first one I was referring to is a 1031 exchange, which only applies to investment real estate. The second one I'm referring to is called a deferred sales trust.
A real eye opener to see that there are ways that people can use the regulatory framework, if properly structured, to invest 1031 exchange dollars in things that you would not think were like kind to what they exited from. So it was very impressive. I got to say, you are the first one I've seen pull this off, and I'm pretty hesitant to believe in a lot of these kinds of things. So it's a major feat for me to say, wow, this actually really worked, and it was really cool.
1031 is a way to shelter your income when you sell the thing. The DST is a way to avoid the 1031 and not have to suffer the time penalty.
Our career and during different tax periods, we've seen, these tax avoidance, tax minimization, offshore, all these different strategies undertaken to minimize or avoid taxes. And then I can tell you that, some of them are just not worth the trouble. And so I was skeptical. Admittedly, I was skeptical. I thought, oh yeah, here we go, another one of these, right? And then they say, no, it really is different, right? So look more closely. We looked more closely. We had, honestly, 2 years of conversations. 2 years. Now we were being due diligence at the same time that we were doing due diligence, but 2 years is a long time to be, sort of flirting with the idea of and getting to know the people and getting to really understand the transaction. Yeah, long story short, we got comfortable, although we are not tax attorneys, lawyers, or estate planning attorneys, that at least, from an investment perspective, that, it made sense to sell a highly appreciated asset, get liquid, hold that in this type of a deferred or installment sale type of instrument, and then just be in a position then to do the most important thing. I'm probably stealing your next question, which is time. They say, well, you can't make more time. You can. The deferred sales trust, in a way, allows you to lengthen the investment time horizon for those assets after getting liquid, but before having to feel the tax impact. And from an investment manager's perspective, time horizon is the most important element in investing.
All right. So with that, let's kick this off with that in mind. Ways to basically build what we call an effective capital gains tax exit plan. And there's, you guys have probably heard of the 1031 exchange. You might have even heard of the Delaware Statutory Trust. And today we're going to be touching on those, but mainly we're going to touch on something you probably never heard of, which is a deferred sales trust. It's a proven strategy that we found unlocks exactly what David just said at the end of that video, which is time. Whereas the other strategies, you are locked in time. It also unlocks the ability to invest with groups like Grant and Stoic funds to be able to diversify the wealth and still be tax deferred and be in like a fund or a syndication, which is typically very difficult or nearly impossible to do with other strategies. And this does it in a way that's going to help you to have, again, not only build an effective capital gains exit plan, but also maybe unlock some freedom and flexibility with your wealth. And so this is called a deferred sales trust. Before we get into all the details of that, why is now the time to go all in on the deferred sales trust? Let's start with a macro view of what's happening right now. There's about $84 trillion over the next 18 years, according to Marcus and Millichap, as one study that'll be passing from the baby boomers mainly to the future generations, and what's known as the largest wealth transfer in the history of the planet. In fact, there's 77 million baby boomers in the US alone, and every single day, about 10,000 of them are turning 65. This is a massive, massive challenge for wealth transfer as it pertains to tax being the middle person or the middle challenge that's to be overcome. Another stat for you that 50% of the total net worth in America is tied to commercial real estate, high-end primary homes, and private equity known as businesses, okay? Those 50%, that's the total net worth in America. Most of that is highly appreciated for the baby boomers, right? And so they have this big challenge, and that challenge is somewhere between 25% and 50% of their proceeds are going to be taxed if they sell. So they feel trapped or stuck between a rock and a hard place because if they don't sell, they don't necessarily get the freedom, the flexibility, the retirement, the impact they want to do with their wealth, the better return on equity, the more diversification, the less debt, the partnership separation. If they don't do all of these things, they don't get those freedoms, right? But if they sell and they have to 1031 exchange, a lot of times they're just trading their existing problems for more problems or new problems, which can be challenging. So that's why we want to present the deferred sales trust as a solution for these challenges and a number of other things. Before we get started, though, it's always important to talk about who this is not for. Who is this not for? Okay. This presentation or this strategy, the deferred sales trust, is not for someone who's selling something that doesn't at least have $1 million net proceeds and $1 million gain. In other words, it needs to be big enough sales, large gain, larger sales, because what? It's not inexpensive and it's not just simple. It does take planning, and it is expensive. It can be viewed as expensive. We'll talk about how to make the deferred sales trust an investment an expense, but we've got to have at least enough capital gains tax there to defer. And again, we can defer up to 100% of the capital gains taxes, but you need to have at least $1 million net proceeds, which means about $250,000 of liability to up to $500,000 of liability. And no matter what state you're selling, you say, well, how's it up to 50%? Well, there's depreciation recapture, especially if you own real estate for many years, depending on what kind of entity you have. A good rule of thumb is about 30%. 30% is a good rule of thumb to use on the total gain. So if you have $1 million gain, your tax liability is about $300,000. It'd be a good fit for us, okay? Number two, this is not for someone who wants 100% unilateral control 100% of the time. As real estate investors and entrepreneurs and business owners, I imagine a lot of you are, we're used to making and building wealth on ourselves or with our teams, right? And we have that control. Although with the deferred sales trust, you do have to give up some control. Part of our role as a deferred sales trust trustee is to serve in that capacity. But as a reminder, most people, you've already done this. You just perhaps realize it. If you've done a 1031 exchange, you've given up unilateral control. If you have an IRA or 401k, you've given up some controls. And this gives you the ability to defer the tax. But you do have to give up some controls, and we'll talk about that here, what that looks like. Also, if you have carry forward loss, always check with your CPA. If you have an old asset that had sold a couple of years back that had a loss, some of that's carry forward and it can offset capital gains tax. Keep that in mind. The next one would be, who is it not for? If you have a good 1031 exchange, if you have a good solid 1031 exchange, go into that, right? If you want to be in the toilets, trash, active management of the deal, by all means, 1031 exchange are pretty inexpensive. If you can find the deal in the time frame, man, we love 1031s. In fact, we do a lot of 1031s for our clients. That's where we started out at Marcus & Millichap as a broker, selling and helping people with 1031 exchanges before we found the deferred sales trust. But if you have a good 1031, by all means, do that. By the way, we have a backup plan for failing 1031s we'll talk about here in a minute. The next part, who is not for, if you want to spend all of the funds on your personal goods all right now. If you want to spend all of the funds from the sale on personal stuff, like a primary home or your boat, or just spending money. It's your money. If you want to spend it on personal stuff, the government doesn't give us a good tax deferral strategy for that. They want to incentivize commerce, which means investing the funds into businesses and real estate and the stock market. The next thing, who is not for, if you don't have a 40% estate tax known as a death tax challenge. It's important to understand that a stepped up basis does not solve for estate tax. And a lot of us have been taught not the full story, that, just swap until you drop. Just keep doing that 1031 exchange. And then when you die, you get the stepped up basis, and then boom, you're good to go on tax. You're tax free. Your kids are, at least. That's pretty cool. That's true for capital gains tax, but guess what? There's a thing called a death tax, and that's 40% of anything above 12 million married, 6 million single as of 2026. It's a little bit higher right now. It's double that right now until 2026, but that's really important because you need to know what you're trying to solve for. In fact, if there's one thing that I can stress today is, are you clarifying your tax flow, debt flow, cash flow, and even legacy for your wealth? And part of your legacy is how it's going to transfer and whether or not it'll be hit with that death tax. And so as a quick example, let's say you're worth $52 million right now, and in 2026, and you're married, the exemption is 12 million. That means there's a $40 million that's inside of your taxable estate that's subject to the estate tax. Well, that 40 million times by 40% would be subject to that estate tax. So we'll just do the simple math, 40 million by 40%, that's $16 million. Now you would have got the stepped up basis. Let's say it was an apartment complex portfolio or an industrial apartment portfolio. You would have got the stepped up basis on that 52 million, but they immediately assessed that $16 million of tax because it's a separate tax. Okay. So don't forget about that. But if you don't have that, then this is, this could not be for you. The last one would be the fees are too expensive for you. You don't see a clear way to make the DST an investment and not an expense. The fees are about, just to get it out of the way, about 1.5% to 2% on the AUM on average to manage the capital. So if it's $1 million, it's about 15 to 20,000 per year. Although we're typically able to return 6 to 9% on average, net of fees when we work with groups like Stoic with Grant and such for especially real estate assets such as industrial assets. But that's a general rule of thumb, and it's about 1.5% on the gross sales price to set it up. It's a one-time fee, but we'll talk about ways to make the DST an investment, not an expense on this presentation. And let's start with the one of the drawbacks of the DST that we found for a lot of folks is just the lack of public awareness. Like, how many of you, if you could put into the chat before Grant invited you to this presentation, have ever heard of deferred sales trust? You might have heard of DSTs with Delaware Statutory Trust, but you might not have heard of a deferred sales trust. In fact, some people don't even know about Delaware Statutory Trust, which we'll talk about the differences here in a minute as well. But if you could put in the chat, just as a curiosity for Grant and I, if you could put before this presentation, have you ever heard of the deferred sales trust? Put yes or no, right? So yes, you have, put yes. If you haven't, put no, I hadn't heard of it until like maybe the advertisement that Grant put on, and maybe you looked up my name or something, right? Like you put yes or no. This would be the time for you to click on the chat. So we got Ron, we got Bradley, we got Frank, we got Mark, we got William. If you guys could put yes or no, had you heard of it? That'd be really helpful for us also to get a feel for where you guys are at with that. So if you could do that, it'd be fantastic. All right. So, which lends into this question, right? Is it too good to be true, right? Like, I feel like I would have heard about it, right? This is what we thought. I was at Marcus and Millichap in 2006. I started there. And we learned about the 1031 exchange like day 3. Everyone knew about it in real estate, right? At least we thought, and we did. And it wasn't until 2009 that I learned about the deferred sales trust after the market crash. And we said, this seems like it's too good to be true. Like, we're the Navy SEALs of real estate brokerage. At least we thought, right? We have all the innovative ways to do things. We're right on the cutting edge, but we didn't know about it either, right? And that's the biggest drawback that many people face that they have their CPAs that hadn't heard of it, and or they may have heard of it, but they don't know how to do it. So it creates this uncertainty of, I'm not sure if it's going to work. And I want to try to just help you get some confidence right now by knowing that the deferred sales trust, it's not anything to be scared of. The IRS has seen it multiple times, over 25 times, state or federal audits, thousands of closes, perfect track record, literally batting 1,000. We've never been on any watch lists or IRS, dirty dozen lists. It's billions of assets sold, asset value sold over the years, close to 30-year track record. And again, there's lifetime audit defense too built in, but it's batting 1,000. So just because the CPA hasn't heard of it or doesn't know about it, we invite you to bring them in. And maybe you are that CPA watching this. Come on in. We'll talk to you about it. In fact, the founder of this, the creator of this, one of the business partners, he is a CPA. He's also a tax attorney, and he created the structure. And he's been through all the audits. And oftentimes we spend 15, maybe 20 minutes max with a CPA, and they become, very open and start sending us referrals, honestly, once the deals start closing. So this is something just to keep in mind for the track record for this. Now, what the DST team and what the DST helps you to do, not only does it help you to, defer capital gains taxes, but also it gives an opportunity to bring in and build in like what I call a family office wealth team. And part of that team could be like Stoic and Grant as a group to invest with alongside of with the tax deferred money, which is great, right? So you could sell your one asset that you're doing all of yourself, and you can have it in good hands and in good places to invest with a group that has a proven track record in commercial real estate investing, and maybe diversify out of multifamily, diversify out of mobile home parks, and go into some more industrial and in different timing and different amounts. Like, this is the beauty of the DST, is it actually helps to bring together a group of team members to help you with the future management and the stewardship of your wealth. Next, it also protects your assets. It protects your assets in that it has a naturally built-in asset protection, because technically you don't own the trust. The trust owes you back the money, which we'll talk about. You are the creditor. And so you can't be sued and something can't be taken that you don't own. So you are the creditor of the trust owes you the money, and the trust is not owned by you. We'll talk about that, how that works. You can eliminate 100% of the estate tax. This is amazing. Again, we talked about it briefly before. But if you have a net worth greater than 12 million married, 6 million single, you have an estate tax problem, which means we need to talk about your tax flow, estate tax, death tax solutions, right? The DST Plus can solve that. Any size deal, $1 billion deal, $100 million deal, on the sale one day, we can eliminate that estate tax forever. And all of the growth is outside your taxable estate, and your children can be the beneficiaries of that DST 2.0. It's really powerful. No charity required, no life insurance required, no gifting required. Next is we can rescue and save a failed 1031 exchange, or even eliminate the need for the 1031 altogether. How nice would it be to not have to worry about the 45-180? If I can get the little bit of love you put in the chat, that would be cool, Brett. Or yes, that sounds good. Never have to be forced by the 1031 exchange to be, a shotgun wedding is what we call it, right? A really fast decision where all of the investment is going into one asset and 45 to 180. Also, you have to replace that debt, right? That debt flow. Remember, don't forget about that. Interest rates have jumped so high. It's not a great time to be in what we call poor debt unless you can make a nice deal, which is challenging to find with the 1031 under those short circumstances. The last thing here is we help you get a new, fresh depreciation schedule. If you've owned multifamily for 27.5 years or commercial properties for 39, your depreciation, if you've taken straight line, is fully depreciated. Well, what would be nice to get a new depreciation schedule and be able to get more tax flow benefits. Okay. So quickly, the benefits of this as well. For this is the 1.0. We typically can return 6 to 9% interest rate on the promissory note, a net of fees. You have liquidity and diversification. You can put the money in money markets. You can put it in stocks if you want to. We're not big stock guys, but you could do that if you want to. We have certified financial planners to balance the portfolio. You could also put it into lending. And you can put it, of course, with Stoic, with industrial properties. Amazing passive. It can be funds. It can be syndications. There's really open source for investments. Okay. Also, typically no debt replacement is required unless you have some debt over basis, which we can solve for. But you can partner with the DST also to be an entrepreneur and do the deals yourself. You might want to be an entrepreneur. This is not just for the passive investor. This is also for the entrepreneur who wants to build multifamily, build industrial properties, build a business. The trust can partner with you. We call it the go fund yourself. This is one of the single best reasons to use the DST, is you can be an entrepreneur tax deferred at any time to build more businesses or real estate. These are 10-year terms. Typically, they can be renewed every 10 years, and your kids can also step into your shoes and continue the tax deferral for generations to come. We help you unlock some freedoms. And I think this is important to understand, right? Each of us are looking for certain freedoms in our lives at different times of our life. We unlock not only time freedom, because you don't have to manage the properties yourself anymore. Location freedom, you don't have to stay in the state in which you're located. You can diversify into different places, different assets. You can retire. You can also be an entrepreneur. You can get 1031 freedom, debt tax freedom, diversification freedom. Like you can diversify the wealth, liquidity freedom, debt freedom, partnership freedom, optimal timing freedom, and hopefully some more cash flow. We typically increase cash flow by 20, 30, 40, 50% because we unlock that capital and redeploy it into groups like Stoic, which gives the ability to get more return on the investment, bigger deals, more deals, right? More cash flow, which is a great way to do it. Yeah, we also coach top tier real estate professionals, CPAs, financial advisors, commercial real estate folks like Grant as well. Okay, this is just a quick little graphic in case you want to subscribe to the YouTube channel. There's a little QR code down there. Take a picture of this if you'd like. This essentially is some of the main things that we just talked about in a short little format. So I'll give you about 20 seconds. I'm going to pause here. Grant, how am I doing? And people, if you have questions, we'd love for you to put it into the chat, and we can try to answer them along the way or answer them at the end. But Grant, how are we feeling so far? How are we doing?
Yeah, no, everything's going great. Very interesting content and everything going well.
Anything
I'm
really
sure that
stick
you'll
out
get
for
to
you?
this.
Anything
sorry?
really stick out for you so far? Like, wow, I think this really sticks out for what you're learning about it, Grant.
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing that I'm kind of wanting to learn more about is the logistics piece of, obviously the trust doesn't, or the trust owns the actual asset. You are the creditor getting an interest rate essentially on the promissory notes. I'm sure that we're going to get into that, but that's really the biggest piece that's missing for me.
Perfect.
Of to understand.
Yeah, absolutely. The how to, right? Real quick, us versus them. This is the 1031 exchange. We call that blockbuster on the right-hand side versus what we call the deferred sales trust analogy of Netflix. Okay. So you remember going to that old blockbuster, Grant,
Oh, yeah.
it was, the movie was behind that cardboard box, first it was a movie, then it was a DVD. You had to return in 3 days. You had to either drive in the snow maybe, or in the rain, and it might be checked out. Anyways, this thing came around called Netflix, and it changed everything. Well, we think they were like Netflix, honestly. This is the reality. Like, we can do all assets of any kind. We can exit crypto, businesses, real estate, primary homes. 1031 is only investment real estate. We can also invest into any asset at any time. 1031, only investment real estate. And that's the next one. Anytime. We can dollar cost average versus the restricted timing of the 1031. We can be outside the taxable estate. The 1031 exchange without any other planning is inside the taxable estate. We offer liquidity, and they are always non-liquid. Okay. Typically, actually, I haven't seen anything that's not on like 1031. New depreciation versus old. And so that's another quick little graphic for you. For that, we've already talked about the elimination of the debt tax, which was huge. Here's some client success stories, and then we'll dive into how this all works. Now, this is Nick and Jeannie, and they had $11 million worth of a business and real estate in Colorado. In fact, they had the business passed down to from 50-year-old business with multiple families passed on, and it was a C corp, and it was subject to huge tax. We were able to defer 100% of the capital gains taxes. It was amazing. They were blown away on their $8 million business sale. Sold another $3 million asset. And yes, they combined both equities into one trust. So you can have one trust, multiple exits that land into the trust, right? And deferred all the tax.
Real quick question on that. Timeline wise, if you have multiple assets going into one trust, do they have to be timed at the same time, or can you do different time schedules?
Different times, totally different times. Yeah. So all different times. That's a good way to do it. If you're wondering, well, those guys look like they're passive, ready to retire. Yeah, they probably are. They definitely are more passive, ready to retire, although they still have active ownership in mobile home parks and other apartment complexes and such. But there's also the entrepreneur who's still very active. This is one of our clients. He sold 120 million worth of five multifamily exits into the DST. Now, he put his smaller chunks in. So he was the GP, right? So he didn't have 120 million of his own equity. The asset value was 120 million. He had like, one was like, 2, one was 3, one was 1, one was 5, like different amounts as he would sell for his equity share. But instead of just paying tax, because they're not typically doing 1031 exchanges, and they also wanted to get diversified. He was taking some chips off the table. They have over like 2,500 units, but he's an entrepreneur. And then he partners with the trust to go back into his own deals anyways, right? And or go into passive deals like grants. Like, this is the beauty of this. Like he in fact, he likes to do both. Even though he's a very active entrepreneur, he wants to diversify. He doesn't want to just put it all into his own deals. He wants to diversify into other passive deals that he can go into. So
you can go back into his own deals though with that, because I know that's obviously a problem if you have like retirement account kind of stuff. You can't go into your own deals, but you can on that. Okay,
there's no challenges with that. Yeah, we're totally flexible, right, on that. And you can manage them yourself, run yourself. We do it through a joint venture LLC, the way we do it. And we'll talk about that here more in a minute. This is Dave Levinson. He sold a $7.6 million deals in Athens, Georgia. I didn't know there was an Athens, Georgia until I met Dave.
Well, that's what University of Georgia is. Big school.
Yeah, which is really cool. So I just moved to the East Coast, so I'm just getting used to all of that, which is really cool. But I was in California, Taxifornia, where Dave was from, and Dave is on multiple 1031s. Not only was he faced with a huge capital gains tax of over $1 million, he also had a lot of debt. In fact, he had about 4.6 million of debt. So he netted about 3.1 million into the trust, deferred about $1 million of tax. The biggest thing is he got debt. He got paid off all his debt. he got tax deferred, and he got timing back on the side. He put it 100% into passive real estate, and he's done really well. Like, it's been really great, you know, to be able to do that, to diversify, versus what happened with a lot of people. They had done these 1031 exchanges, and they doubled down on all of their equity into one deal, and now the debt is getting reset, and now they're losing half or all of their wealth. It's happening all over again. It's really frustrating, right, to see that, because people felt like they had to, right? So we saved his failed 1031 from the qualified intermediate. We saved it past his 45-day. It was amazing. Another entrepreneurial client, Dharma, he does land flips in Texas. So close to $40 million in just two deals. He exited short term, meaning he tied the land up, held it for less than a year. Didn't even hold it for, he didn't actually hold it at all. Held it for less than a day. And he used this to defer the capital gains tax on the ordinary income tax. Whereas if, as a reminder, 1031 only works for 1 year or more of holding. So we can also defer ordinary income tax on deals like this. On certain deals like this, not all ordinary income tax, but the way that he had structured it, we did it, okay? And the list goes on and on and on. There's a $17 million deal. This is the Airbnb with Stormy, $17 million business sale in Sacramento with Jeff. Here's another deal, Ron Anderson, a deal in Denver, Colorado, $4 million exit. He and his wife just had a great Airbnb, and actually it was doing phenomenal. But the challenge was it was taking up too much of their time and their energy. This is Shay. He sold a business and he started to build with the capital of the trust 70 multifamily units. That was a really big win for him. It was the entrepreneurial freedom, moving from one business to another business, also diversified into passive real estate stuff. This is Steve. We saved a partnership separation on a 1031 exchange. I call him Skeptical Steve, and he doesn't mind me saying that. He grew up in a real estate family doing 1031s. He thought that was the only way to do it. And then he met us and he's like, what? You could do this? And we saved his 1031, actually sold his property in Sacramento and did everything A to Z for him. All right. So all that being said, how does this all work? Let's see if someone wants to participate. You can unmute yourself. There's Bradley, Frank, Mark, or Ron. And if none of you guys want to participate, that's okay too. Then we'll have Grant do it. But if anyone wants to participate, we can walk you through how this works as an example. So you can unmute yourself, say hello, and we'll dive in. If that sounds good, I'll give you about 7 seconds to jump in on this. Okay. Grant, you're the guy. Okay.
Sounds good to me.
All right. So Grant, let's imagine Grant was the seller up in the top left, right? And he and his family are finally looking to go off into new adventures for whatever that means to them. But they have this asset that's worth $10 million that is fully depreciated. Let's do a zero basis, right? So they're going to have a tax of about 40%. Let's just say that's the number. So 4 million is the number we're solving for. So instead of selling directly to a buyer, Grant, you see this here?
Yeah.
And the buyer giving you the money and you paying the 4 million of tax, we're gonna say, don't do that. We're gonna ask the buyer to cooperate. You see how this would be triggered? Because you just get the money, you just pay the tax, right? The money hits your hands, the tax is triggered, right? Instead, we're gonna set up this trust in between to receive the capital, right? Receive the capital. And this is the key here. Before close of escrow, before the buyer removes contingencies, we are going to set this up and we're going to give Grant the option to execute this. The trust is going to step in right in between the sale. Okay. And Grant, if you sell the asset to the trust for 10 million and the trust sells the asset immediately to the buyer for 10 million, what's the gain if you sold for 10, if the trust sold for 10 and bought for 10 and sold for 10? What's the gain for the trust? Zero, right? So how much tax does the trust owe on zero gain?
Zero.
You got it. Okay. Now, what did you do? Well, you got an installment. You did an installment. So you did a seller carryback. Installment payments are made to you from the DST, but we're going to structure this as a $10 million note. Now, if there was closing costs or debt, whatever, it would be a little bit less, but just to keep it simple, right?
Yeah.
10 million, let's structure it at about 8%, but you receive zero at closing. Okay. You get a promissory note. And let's say we have an 8% starting in month one or year two or something, right? But essentially the payments can be structured however you like. But if you receive zero at closing, how much of the 4 million is triggered today if you receive zero at closing?
Zero.
You got it. Now, our clients are going to live off about 8%. on average, or they can live off 5%. They can let the other amount accrue. It's up to you. Grant might say, look, it's going to be earning about 800,000 a year, but I'd like to take, 300,000 of payment because that's about what I need or want right now. And let's let the other 500 accrue, right? The other 500,000 will just build up and accrue. So that's the promissory note. Now you're saying, well, where do we get the money? Well, the buyer put the $10 million into the trust. Okay. Where does it go? Typically like Charles Schwab to start. Okay. The cash, we don't. So in other words, what Grant did is he financed the trust. And the buyer just brought the cash. So trust bought and sold for the same price. Grant did a regular installment sale with the trust. Simple. Trust sold it for the 10 to the buyer. Money hits the trust. Smoke clears. Buyer has title. He goes away. Now, this is where the cool stuff happens. This 10 million. Let's go to Stoic funds, for example. On average, what do you think you could return if someone put 10 million with you guys over a 5-year term? What do you think?
About 1.7 times their money. So 17.5 back.
Yeah. 1.75 or about 1.7 million, right? And what's on average cash on cash per year?
About 7 to 8.
Yeah. Okay, let's do 8, right? So just one option. And we wouldn't necessarily recommend you put 100% of all of your capital into one group, but just as an easy example, this is.
We'll take it if they want to. That's okay with us.
You got to keep some liquidity, some diversification, but this is just an idea. So Grant, how cool is this, right? You have 4 million extra that could go. And in fact, this might be a good analogy here, right? Someone might say, oh, that's cool. Grant introduced me to this strategy with Brett, and Brett helped me with this. I would have had just 6 million. Right now I've got an extra 4 because it's deferred. Now this 4 million, by the way, I'm assuming it's a married couple here. Otherwise it would be 5 per person per year. We'll talk about that here in a second, but 4 million, you're going, well, that's what's owed to the government, right? But it's in a 0% state right now, meaning there's no interest that's owed to the government as long as this 10 million is invested in real estate or other investments, and you don't dip into the 10 million on the payout. You just dip into the interest payout, which is what most of our clients will do. They'll live off just the interest payout or a portion of the interest payout. But in the meantime, this money, this 6 plus 4, this 10 million can be invested. Okay. And so this is producing, let's just say on average, about 800,000 a year. Okay. This investment, it rolls back into the trust, which turns around and can pay here. So I'm going to pause there. Any questions from anybody?
Yeah, so a couple on that. So up in the top left, so that 8% on the promissory note, is that just a number that is chosen by the client and you guys to kind of fit the right risk parameters, or where does that interest rate come from?
Yeah, so you do a risk tolerance questionnaire before anything is set up. It's a great question.
Yeah.
And that risk tolerance questionnaire will score your risk, and that'll score the note. Our notes are basically between 5 and 9, right? Depending on your risk tolerance.
Okay, that makes sense. And then obviously you would need to have a buyer that was somewhat maybe in line with this. How long does that process take? Like, let's say that I had a flex industrial building I wanted to sell today, had a buyer come to me already, but I wanted to, set up a DST before closing on that asset. Like, how long will we have to give that buyer, or how long does that
Great question.
take?
So we typically like to, first of all, we work on a conditional basis, 100% conditional, and we put the language in up front. We are brokers ourselves, and we have all of that. We have escrow, we have brokers, we have it all. So we ideally put the language in the LOI to start. So like, say it was your deal, Grant. Seller, you, Grant, have the right to a 1031 exchange or deferred sales trust and no additional cost to the buyer. A simple language gives you the option, the right to, an option to use it. Doesn't force you to use it. That starts in the beginning, and as the contract goes, we have the right to insert it into the contract. So that's a simple way, but we do need to form the trust and insert the specific trust into the contract, unless we're going to save a failed 1031 exchange. But yeah, that's how that would work.
So you're essentially just assigning the contract at that point if you came in midway through.
Yeah. Sometimes you're assigning the interest of an LLC. Sometimes you're just it's a 2D transfer. So it's not a one size fits all, but
Yeah.
the smoke clears and what would have been due to you in full, the trust receives and gives you a promissory note to pay you over time. Is that making sense? And maybe Grant froze there. I'll give a chance to come back. How about Bradley, Frank, Mark, or Ron? Any thoughts or questions on what just happened on this slide? You can unmute yourself or type it in the chat, but essentially just want to make sure you guys are getting what's happening here. Grant is back.
Am I back? Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
back now. So quick question. So timeline wise, so like a typical sales process of industrials can be 90 days. Is that enough time to from start to finish?
Oh,
to be able to
100%.
get
We've
that
done we've done deals in 14 days, in 7
Okay.
days, 30 days, but no one likes to work on a fire drill. So get with
Yeah.
us earlier the better. It's never too early for us, but it can be too late if the buyers remove contingencies. And you also don't want to have the buyer use this against you as if they're like, oh, we'll do you a favor, Grant, and accommodate. You know
We'll
what I
help
mean?
you out, but you got to
Yeah,
give us
I mean,
this.
but exactly. That's why you want to put the language in up front. It's like, you're not helping me out on my 1031 DST. Like, I already have that figured out, but you're going to cooperate. But it should make no difference to the buyer whatsoever.
Yeah.
And that's why you want to say do it. Okay. So any other questions on this, Grant, before you keep moving?
I think I'm good.
Okay, great. Let me just need to erase all this stuff here. So I can erase all clear all drawings. Okay, cool. All right,
There you go.
moving right along. Here's some other deals we did quickly. Primary home sales, Cupertino, Saratoga, San Diego, Sacramento. We saved a 1031 for a client. Monterey, 17 million Sacramento, Auburn, California, Placerville. We've done Bitcoin and Ethereum. Here's a $33 million Phoenix, Arizona exit, $8 million primary home, luxury home in Palo Alto, business sale, on and on and on. So a little bit about us. If you're curious about who we are, we believe we've been given certain gifts to be a blessing and make an impact in this world. And we feel it's a calling to fight for the good fight of freedom, right? And freedom meaning making an impact and helping the most vulnerable people in the world by being great stewards with wealth and helping others do the same. Our purpose is to help you envision and what a future could be with strategies such as the deferred sales trust, build a team and a strategy and a structure to unlock the freedom for yourself and make an impact. So we unlock capital gains tax to unleash freedom and impact. Our big, hairy, audacious goal is to become a Fortune 1000 company through essentially achieving our mission, which is positively impacting 1 million lives, by providing $100,000 capital gains tax and estate tax solutions. And the way we're going to do this is through our mission, which is just to lead and inspire the building of wealth and freedom through the relentless execution of capital gains tax and estate tax solutions. So that's a big statement, but that's kind of the core of who we are and what we're about. And we do this through our flywheel, which is starting where we're at right now, is identifying assets that have huge capital gains tax or estate tax challenges, and then essentially using the DST as a way to move that to the next stage, which is then once it's in the DST, to invest into real estate, securities, or businesses. This is ultimately going to create more jobs and more housing and more commerce, which is going to create more tax revenue, which that means the government wins too. It creates more wealth and freedom, and it goes around and around and around. Are some of our core values. I'll just talk about, one of them here, which is purpose-driven lives. We really believe we're here to make a difference and to drive and help more people unlock their purpose with capital and to make an impact. A little bit about myself and my family. We live in St. Augustine, Florida, by way of Taxifornia. We wrote a best-selling book recently, which is pretty cool. Kevin Harrington from Shark Tank. So 5 children, 4 daughters and a boy. I played basketball in college, a huge basketball fan, huge lifelong 49er fan. My heart is broken after the 3rd Super Bowl loss here recently.
Sorry.
Yeah. But yeah, that's it. I was at Marcus and Millichap for a number of years. I've closed about $500 million in multifamily, mostly in DST transactions. And we have the best 1031 exit plan, which is really, I talked about, we do this. If you're going to do a 1031 exchange, we want to encourage you to look at the best 1031 exit plan. This gives you the ability to go for your 1031 in case it fails. You have a backup. We can save that into the deferred sales trust. You can also do a partial Delaware, partial 1031, and a partial deferred sales trust. We have a course on this, and we have the actual service itself, the 1031 service. Okay. So we have a saying that goes like this: friends don't let friends do a 1031 without a backup plan. Right. And most QI companies do not know about this or don't want you to know about this. They want to keep you in the 1031 because that's what they make money on. And it's all they make money on is the 1031, right? So instead, make sure you have at least a backup plan. Okay. Now, every other strategy or every other exit for assets asset classes need to be set up prior to the close of escrow. So this best 1031 plan only works for investment real estate. Okay. And again, you get the full 1031 service. You can go to the QR code. You can go to experttaxsecrets.com to learn more. Everything else needs to be set up prior to the close of escrow. Really, really important to understand that. And prior to the buyer moving contingencies. Yeah, so that's the best 1031 exit plan. Great. Any questions on the best 1031 exit plan?
No, that makes sense. We have, I was also Mark's mill chat broker for a long time, and we have both been in it where you see a 1031 blow up at the last moment and cost the sellers a ton of money, or they end up in a deal that they don't want to go into, which is always the problem with 1031 is if it's a great time to sell something, it's not always the greatest time to buy something. But you get forced into doing it, which is a problem. So no, I think that makes tons of sense.
Yeah. So whatever you do, please share this with everybody. The worst calls we get is when someone's in what's called 1031 jail. They're with these big corporate 1031 companies that are really great at what they do for 1031, but all they offer is Blockbuster. And then their client finds us, and then they say, would you do Netflix? And they go, no, we only do Blockbuster. And they keep them in that jail, right? And then the worst calls is they won't cooperate. And so we encourage you, please don't go with the QI company that won't offer the Netflix. Okay. Make sure you have both options.
Yeah.
We also wrote the book here. You can check out the book. Pretty cool. It's a whole story about how we built this. With that being said, I'm going to open up for questions, and also try to think about the things that I said I would touch on here that we haven't touched on yet. But if you're watching this too, I want you to actually really contact Grant and find a time that we could all connect and talk about ways to, once the capital is in the trust, to invest with his company and opportunities there. But questions or things, Grant, that I said I was going to cover that I didn't cover. Do you anything come to mind?
Yeah, a couple of quick things. So number one, so reports and updates on someone's trust. So if they set up a trust with you guys, do they get quarterly reports, monthly reports? Like, how does that look from you guys?
Great question. First of all, you have 24/7 access to view the funds online, right? Okay. And so if they're like at TD Ameritrade, Charles Schwab now, you can access it and see it online. All the statements, all the tax documents. We have a third-party tax preparer. They're kind of like an auditor, but it's not actually an audit, but it's a corporate tax return. These are business trusts that only do business with you. You are the creditor, but nothing moves without your approval or your signature. These entities are never commingled in other trust or other business accounts or personal accounts. It's all there. We have the third-party tax attorney that represents you, lifetime audit defense. I am the third-party trustee, third-party tax preparer that does the P&L, or we do the P&L. They do the tax return. Charles Schwab, third-party, largest in the world now. And then you like third parties like you. So there's so much accountability and transparency on these things. The funds never move without your approval or your signature. They also don't move without my approval or signature because I'm the trustee. If you had unilateral to move the funds on your signature, it'd be taxable. This is why you work with us. But again, a lot of times we have certified financial planners that are actually pushing the button. What happens if I get hit by the bus is another question, right? We have a succession plan in place, another trustee. If we're both on that same bus, then there's another succession plan for the law firm to have another trustee. You can't choose your trustee. A lot of people want to do that. You can have trust protectors for extra money. You could pay them, and they could be that like extra signer on the accounts that we could arrange if you felt like, hey, who's this Brett guy, and I want to get extra trust protection. Okay, I know I answered more there, but I just wanted to, because I know some of those things are tied on that.
No, that's great. I think Mark had a question about saving on estate tax. If you could dig into that a little bit more on exactly how you save on estate tax, would be great.
Yeah, so you don't save, you eliminate, Mark. So there's a saying, and there's actual part of the tax code. You can have a stepped up basis, or you can have it outside your taxable estate, but you can't have both. And so first of all, clarifying, let's say your total estate, Mark, is $100 million, and it's all inside of the taxable estate. So the question is, when you die, if it's inside, it's subject to 40% death tax, except for if you're married, 12 million of that be exempt. So if you've ever seen the show Yellowstone, it's the entire show. Kevin Costner has all the land. He's the last heir that owns the land. And if he dies, his kids will get a stepped up basis, but they'd have to pay the estate tax. And so spoiler alert, like they're all trying to get the land. And Beth even talks about it in the show. And I'm always screaming, Beth's the daughter, who's the attorney, who's just really smart. Hey, Beth, Kevin, use the DST plus to get it outside your taxable estate. And so On a sale, it does take a sale. Let's say you have $100 million business you're going to sell tomorrow. Upon the sale, we use something outside of 453 installment sale. It's different than just a traditional installment sale, but it changes your ownership from ownership to a lender. It's owed back to you, and the way that we do it has a note that owes you back the money, but it cancels upon your death. And if you're married, your spouse's death, and your children are the beneficiaries of that second trust. It's called a DST 2.0. And I can just tell you that it's outside of the taxable estate. Now there's NDAs and there's secret sauce in there about how this all really works, like below the surface. I kind of gave you the above the surface. I can tell you one of the biggest audits was over 120 million plus deal in California on this exact structure. No change, no findings on this. Okay. So it's perfect. It works every time. So with NDAs, we can give you more of that. And so if you have, so Mark is asking, is it like a skin? So it's actually very similar to a lot of things you probably have looked at. Crats, skins, nings, dings, all these different things that are very similar, and maybe have some things, but those are typically not as flexible and not as efficient. Okay. So in one day and one sale, no life insurance, no charity, no gifting required, no accident exemption, we can eliminate it outside your taxable estate. Not only that 100 million, but all of the excess growth of that over your lifetime. Now, one of the downsides, people say, well, why don't you use that every single time versus the DST 1.0, which doesn't get it outside your taxable estate, which is just 453 installment sale. Well, the answer is the payment from this DST 2.0 is going to be partial interest and partial cap gains taxes. So it's actually probably very similar, Mark, to what you might be using. It's just way more effective and way more flexible and way more efficient. And so hopefully that gives you enough, Mark, to know, or have curiosity to get with us, sign our conditional engagement agreements, and or NDAs if you're an advisor for somebody, and then we can give you a little bit more on a live deal. Okay, so it's got to be a live deal. We don't. Part of why we've been able to keep this thing in line is that we don't deviate from just sharing all of the secrets. I think you respect that, Mark. So.
And Mark's a great CPA to work with as well. So he deals with a lot of that. So yeah.
And we love CPAs. Come on in. We introduce you to our, my business partner, CPA tax attorney, sign the NDAs. We have strategic alliances like you across the country. So love to talk with you, Mark, more.
So another question that I had real fast. So, other than, I mean, obviously y'all have your shop. I would assume that most people would have their CPA involved in this. Mm-hmm. Do you, as the client, need your own tax attorney? Do you need a CPA? Like what do you need on your team?
Great question. In fact, it's one of the most important questions, right? Because like in this example, right, Mark may be helping you guys for years, and he's a part of the family, building the wealth, helping with all the tax stuff. And a lot of times it can be frustrating from the CPA's perspective if you're showing up with 30 days to go saying, hey, I learned about this new thing that I want to do for my biggest exit I've ever had. And they're making all these amazing promises. And the first thing that Mark is going to say is, well, it sounds like it's too good to be true. I need to look at this, slow it down. And that's honestly probably one of the biggest roadblocks is when people are not bringing their CPA in for the due diligence, right? They're just almost like, saying, I need your rubber stamp or your approval or your due diligence on this. And they're like, I'm in tax season. This is slow everything down. So first thing is bring the CPA in, number one. Okay. Two, hopefully come well before the time period. But here's the third part I think is really important. It's something this gets missed. A lot of people think, well, if I get audited, I needed my CPA to be able to defend me. And the CPA is like, I've never done that before. Like, you can't ask me to do that. And this is why this CPA and tax attorney actually, they defend, they represent, right? And so it's just bringing another person to the fold. Now, we don't replace CPAs. Like, we don't do personal tax returns. We're not doing business tax returns. We're not doing cost segs. I mean, we'll push that out to other folks. We just do the deferred sales trust. And for that part of it, we would defend the audit should it happen. And it does happen, right? And we would work with Mark to do all of that. But it's a lifetime audit defense, no additional charge. Anyways, that should take the pressure off of someone like a CPA like Mark to feel like, yeah, okay, this is the team that does that piece of it. Like, they're like the knee surgeon for this.
So they're not going to have to become experts on DSTs to be like, well, if this guy gets audited, I'm the one who they're going to look to. That makes sense.
Exactly. They're going to go now. Mark's going to file the tax return, right? And so technically they are looking through the return. We're going to show Mark how to properly report it, right? But the key would be someone like CPA like Mark be comfortable with our CPA tax attorney to know that they're going to work as a team to properly report the what the IRS is asking for. And so far over 27 years, and we don't have a high audit risk. In fact, 12 of the audits were no trigger audits, meaning that they weren't triggered by the deferred sales trust. They were just happened because the high net worth individual was selling a highly appreciated asset. And during that audit, they found the deferred sales trust and then audited the deferred sales trust. We've also had promoter audits. We've also had just the general audits, right? Federal, state, and no change, no findings. We also have third-party national law firms, tons of CPAs that work with us, and have been through a lot of scrutiny, even from FINRA, right? We've been through a ton of due diligence. In fact, one of the best ones was David Young, who you saw in that video, talked about time. David Young ran with a guy named Bill Gross, and they built a company with 5 other guys, essentially called PIMCO, from 80 billion to about 1.2 trillion about 20 years ago. And you can imagine these guys manage some of the biggest wealth in the entire world, and they get approached with these kind of strategies or similar things all the time. People want Bill and David and their team to be like, yeah, have this as one of your solutions because we can help you, right? And help them. Well, they dismiss 99% of these things. Now, we told them, now Bill and David and those 5 guys, they all retired from PIMCO. Bill or David and 5 of the guys form a group called Anfield Capital out of Southern California. And they basically looked at this about 6 years ago, but they did it for a 2-year due diligence on the DST. We told them it's different. Look at it closer. They flew back, met with my business partner, mapped it all out on a whiteboard, signed all the NDAs, had their legal team review it all, talked to the clients. In other words, they did a proper, extensive 2-year due diligence. And guess what happened after 2 years? Number one, they said this guy, his name's Todd, my business partner. He's probably the smartest guy we've ever met. And number two, we're all in. We'll be part of the inner circle. And so they are our inner circle. They will manage capital alongside or any of our DST clients. And so I say to all the folks that are challenging it out there, and they should be very cautious of anything that people come to you with, especially with this type of stakes at hand, is if it's good enough for David Young and his legal team after 2 years of due diligence, is it good enough for me, Grant, Michael, Ron, Frank, Bradley, and anyone else who's listening to this, right? And that's what we're here to tell you. We have those people who have vetted it, that can vouch for it. In fact, he's in the book too. His name is David Young. He has a chapter in the book, Building a Capital Gains Tax Exit Plan. And basically it's just overcoming false beliefs of this is too good to be true. We talk about that in detail. We have a whole playlist on this on our YouTube channel. It's all there, but it's like anything else. Like if you haven't rode the bike before, of course it's going to be wobbly, right? If your CPA hasn't looked at it, of course you're going to be cautious. Take your time, do due diligence with us. We have a very effective way of communicating this, hopefully in a simple way that helps you get comfortable.
That sounds great. Well, I think that was all my questions. Anybody else have anything before we wrap up? Don't think so. Well, this has been extremely helpful. I really feel like I understand them a lot better. I know there's a lot more under that we, that digs more and more into it, but sounds like a great opportunity. Look forward to talking with more clients on it for sure.
Absolutely. And if people want to find you, and if they're watching this on a replay, right, and they want to look at what you guys are doing, where can they find you at, Grant?
Yeah. So our website is stoicep.com. I'm available on my email, which is greaves, GREAVES @stoicep.com. And would love to talk to you more about Stoic funds, get you in connection with Brett, and anything we can do to help would be amazing.
Yeah, and if you're watching this replay and you contact me, make sure you told me you found this through Grant, right? Because that's where we love to work with you together on all this stuff. So appreciate everyone out there. Have a great rest of your day, and thank you for taking the time to spend with us today. We really appreciate it. Don't take that lightly, and we will hopefully talk to all of you guys soon at some point. Okay, take care.
Sounds good. Thanks, everybody.
Hey.